Imagine a room where every man in the room wants you dead, and every law in the country says you shouldn't even be there. Now imagine that you aren't just in the room, you're sitting on the only chair that matters. In the long, blood-soaked history of the Chinese Empire, thousands of men held the title of emperor. Only one woman ever did. Her name was Wu Zetian, and depending on which historian you ask, she was either a visionary genius who saved a dynasty, or a literal demon in silk robes who murdered her way to the top. But here's the thing about history. It's usually written by the people who lost to her. And Wu Zetian? She didn't just win, she changed the rules of the game, while her enemies were still trying to figure out whose turn it was. Our story doesn't start in a palace, but in a shadow. At 14, Wu entered the imperial court as a low-ranking concubine. In the 7th century, this was essentially a dead end. You were a decorative object, a face in a crowd of thousands, meant to be seen and never heard. But Wu had a terrifyingly sharp mind, and something even more dangerous: patience. She spent a decade watching. She watched how power moved, how secrets were traded like currency, and how the emperor's advisors whispered in his ear. She realized that in the Forbidden City, information was more lethal than any blade. When the old emperor died, tradition dictated that Wu and the other childless concubines be sent to a convent to shave their heads and spend the rest of their lives praying in silence. It was a spiritual witness protection program. Most women accepted it. Wu didn't. She had already secured the heart of the new emperor, Gao Zong, through a series of maneuvers that would make a modern political consultant sweat. She didn't just return to the palace. She returned as the power behind the throne. Now, if you've heard of Wu Zetian, you've probably heard the rumors. The stories say she killed her own infant daughter, just to frame the reigning empress. It's a grisly, cinematic image, but look at it through a psychological lens. If you were a male historian 200 years later, wouldn't you paint her as a monster? Whether she did it or not is almost secondary to the fact that her enemies were absolutely terrified of her. She was playing 4D chess, while the court was playing checkers. As Gaozong's health began to fail, Wu stopped being an advisor and started being the engine of the empire. She didn't just maintain the status quo, she dismantled it. At the time, power was held by a small group of elite aristocrats who got their jobs because of who their fathers were. Wu looked at this and saw a recipe for stagnation. So, she did something revolutionary. She opened up the civil service exams to everyone. If you were a brilliant peasant from a dirt-poor village, Wu gave you a seat at the table. She created a meritocracy because she knew that people who earned their power would be loyal to her. She was an absolute master of branding before the word existed. She claimed she was the reincarnation of the Maitreya Buddha. She commissioned massive, towering statues that bore her likeness, carved directly into the mountainsides. She wanted the people to look up and see that her rule wasn't just a political fluke, it was destiny. And it worked. Under her hand, the borders expanded, the Silk Road flourished, the population grew, because, for the first time in generations, the government actually cared if the farmers had enough to eat. But the palace walls were still closing in. Her own sons were waiting for her to die, so they could take what they felt was rightfully theirs. To survive, Wu created a secret police force that would make a dictator blush. Copper boxes were placed in the streets, where anyone could drop an anonymous tip about a traitor. It was a reign of terror for the elites, but for the commoner, it was the most stable the world had ever been. She was a paradox, wrapped in an imperial robe, a tyrant to the powerful, and a champion to the weak. In 690 AD, she did the unthinkable. She officially declared herself emperor, not empress consort, not regent, but Huangdi, the same title as a man. She founded her own dynasty, the Zetian. For 15 years, she ruled alone, the undisputed son of the East. She was 80 years old when she was finally forced to abdicate. And even then, it took a full-scale palace coup to get her to step down. When she died, she left behind a massive stone monument outside her tomb. Traditionally, these stones are carved with the great deeds of the deceased. Wu's tablet, it was left completely blank. Some say it was an act of humility. Others say she was so confident in her legacy that she didn't need to write a single word. She knew that time would eventually peel back the lies of her enemies. Wu Zetian teaches us a cold, hard truth about power. It is never given. It is taken. She lived in a world designed to keep her small, and she decided to become the biggest thing in it. She wasn't a saint, and she certainly wasn't a hero in the traditional sense. She was a strategist who understood that in the game of history, if you aren't the one holding the pen, someone else is going to write your ending. She stayed ahead of the curve until the very last breath, proving that while kings are born, an emperor is made through sheer, unyielding will.